It has been a while since the last episode, but I got a few calls from CEOs that wanted me to interview other CEOs. So I thought it would be great to start it all over during COVID-19. I'm really honored to have you, Jeff Smith, the founder and CEO of Providence Medical Technology. Jeff is a serial entrepreneur. Tell us a little bit more about Providence Medical Technology before we move to the topic of what we're going to talk about, which is about leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that I'm a serial entrepreneur because although Providence is doing well now with a lot of your help, I started off as an entrepreneur. My first company I founded in college when I was at Brown University, and I did a semester abroad in Hong Kong, met some great friends, and one of them in particular was also entrepreneurial minded. We ended up starting a .com in 1999 called soulgear.com, and we had everything. We were going after extreme sports. We could raise money. We were building a website right when e-commerce was really starting to take off. The only thing that we didn't have, which in hindsight was a major mistake, is we didn't have any revenue model. As it relates to Providence, Providence is a spinal implant business. We're focused on improving outcomes for the high-risk patient and avoiding surgical failures of the cervical spine. And so our mission with this technology is to establish the circumferential cervical fusion as the standard of care for the high-risk market. That's about 90,000 patients in the US alone, and we have over 10,000 cases worldwide under our belt. The success, the patient outcomes have been really encouraging. It has been 11 years. It feels like we're just getting started though.
So Jeff, tell us something beyond the business, something interesting about yourself, something that you did in the past, a fun story.
Yeah, I think a fun fact about me is I didn't intend to get into healthcare sales. In college, I didn't take any science classes, barring oceanography, and was just primarily focused on being a banker. My dad was a credit card banker in the 80s and 90s, and then went to work for the credit reporting agencies. And so I always thought that was the direction I would go. I mentioned that first .com. When I came out to San Francisco from the East Coast, I just thought business was really easy. I watched it on TV. You do a .com, you get a lot of traffic. My business partner happened to be on MTV's The Real World, if that doesn't date me enough. And so we do this extreme sports site, we raise all this money, but I really didn't know anything about a business. And so my entrance into healthcare it was the day that we laid off our small team. We were down on Market Street in San Francisco, and one of the folks that led our content operation said, Jeff, I don't know if you're interested, but there's a job fair down the street at the Hyatt, and you might want to check it out. It was a humbling moment, to say the least. And when I got there, this is 2001, we're in the middle of a recession. The booth that had the most people was a pharmaceutical booth. And so I knew nothing about the pharmaceutical industry, medical device, nothing about healthcare at all. But there was a long line. It looked like a challenge. And so I waited my turn and ended up talking my way into a pharmaceutical sales job. And then, that turned into an opportunity working at Cardinal Health and eventually, a career in medical device. So it's funny how the journey, you start in one direction, or at least for me, I started in one direction and ended up finding what I believe I was meant to do. So, because my purpose, as a professional, is just to build products, teams, and when necessary, companies that can improve human health and increase happiness. And so, I love the space. It's a far cry from e-commerce for extreme sports, but I'm glad it ended up the way it did.
What an amazing journey from a banker to medical devices.
Who knew?
So Jeff, in this journey, what's the biggest leadership lesson that you learned that you want to share with other CEOs or aspiring CEOs?
First leadership lesson is no matter how hard a person works and how badly he or she wants the outcome, to accomplish great things and tackle big problems, you can't do it alone. And so becoming a leader, the kind of leader that not only inspires people to join your mission. That's step one and probably table stakes for an entrepreneur. But the best leaders not only get people to join their mission and see what they see, but also take the time to understand the individual people on their team's vision of themselves and their life. And so as a leader, it's something I'm working on as we speak, the power of understanding where someone is trying to take their career, their vision of themselves, even outside of work. And that awareness, when you can understand that and that person feels understood, I think that's where a lot of trust is built. And so you can't really accomplish anything big without a team and trying to go it alone. And so building a team and having success leading them towards a common goal requires trust. And that trust is always going to take some understanding of the other person and their perspective and goals.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's the moment that we really become leaders. Unfortunately, it never happens in the early 20s and the 30s. Everybody else and myself to remember, it happened in the early 40s when this shift happens, that it's not about me, it's about the others. And this is where you feel,
Why do you think that is? What is it about the 40s or 30s?
I don't know, the wisdom of experiences, the failures that we get with trying to do it, to schlep it ourselves without a team, and everything around it, right? It's a realization that there's something there in this camaraderie that brings results, and it works. So give a little bit color to that. What was the steps that you took, or one or two things that were really made the difference to move this shift from yourself towards the team?
Well, in the earlier days of Providence, when we were trying to, prove that we were developing something with value, raising capital, it was very short-term focused, because you'd raise a certain amount of capital, and then with that money, you'd have to deliver the next milestone. And so it was difficult to not be short-term focused. When we got to the point where it was time to build a team, we were trying to recruit and retain, talented leaders from all the important functions of a medical device company. That took a lot of work and it took a lot of time, and we didn't always get it right. So when we ended up finding that the group of people that we wanted to run the business with, the next step, the shift, was understanding, how does this group of people come together? And what are the patterns that we're falling into as a team? And so the work that we did in understanding behavioral tendencies, and I really like the process that you led us through in this idea that everyone has some degree of creative and reactive behavioral tendencies. And this was a new concept for me and our team. And went through surveys from our peers and also through people in a supervisor role, we got a very good map as individuals. How do I show up on this creative and reactive behavioral tendency circle? And the information was eye-opening. For me, I found out that I tend to be a little bit controlling. And when it came to key decisions, I leaned towards the autocratic. And the kind of opposite zone in the creative side, which made sense, is I would become autocratic and controlling because I was achievement oriented. And I had a purpose and a vision that I wanted to see. And so number one was just awareness as an individual and the leader, what my behavioral tendencies are. And what I liked about the process is it wasn't about changing them, because this operating system, took a number of years to develop, but bringing awareness to my own operating system and tendencies, and then through one-on-one discussions and team coaching, really gained some awareness how other people on the team, what their behavioral tendencies were. And the more we started to understand that these are tendencies, not hard ingrained who we are. It's not our identity. These are just how we behave in certain situations. Then we could see the connections and patterns. So if somebody tends to be controlling and arrogant and leads with data, not naming any names, And then another person tends to be protective and collaborative, and they're really trying to make sure that everybody gets along. That combination of someone that's very controlling and someone that's very protective, you could end up with a pattern where one person's ideas or approach becomes what this team does. And that really robs the overall leadership team of a more diverse set of views and a collaborative plan that not only could be a better plan, but would have more buy-in from the team.
So how do you all show up as a team?
We have a lot of balance, and it turns out that it's a complementary group. The different attributes, whether it's to be very oriented towards people, task, outcomes, or emotional safety, all the different areas that we would want in a team are very well represented. And now what we're trying to do is take that balance, and where we don't, if there's a situation where we don't see eye to eye, or more often than not, a specific set of circumstances or a key decision that really tests some of our behavioral tendencies in order to achieve the right goal or result, it might be at odds with, what's the best decision for our people. And that really, for us, as we started doing that work and applying it to our business, that's where this concept of polarity that you introduced us to next was really interesting. And I find it in all areas of my life now.
Anything specifically that you think has the biggest impact on your leadership style?
There are two quotes from my career. One was an author by Jerry Acuff, and he said that in the context of selling, nobody cares how much you know unless they know how much you care.
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me. The other one that I've probably heard in every sales training and even in our coaching is every person has 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you should use them in that ratio. And so those are just two examples of probably the most important thing that I'm learning in trying to become a better leader is to first seek to understand. And if I can understand the situation that we're facing, if I can understand how our people feel about it or how the customer thinks about the product, listening more and talking less is a very specific tactical thing that even in my worst days, I can remember. And so trying to understand what people value and what they care about, if I have that information, not only do I know how best to lead the team, but I also have taken the step to build trust with them. And so in my earlier career, I always wanted to tell people how much I knew or the data and why my model was going to work or this approach would get the best results. And I think later, as I'm trying to become a better leader, and I think one of the metaphors you've used in our coaching, Dave, is above the iceberg or below the iceberg. And so much of where I've operated in my career has been above the iceberg. It's all what's in my head. And so my tell is if I'm going to numbers, if I'm making projections or I'm modeling and I'm talking because I'm trying to convince you that my numbers and models are right, I'm way too above the iceberg. I'm all in the head. And it's going to be very difficult for me to understand how that person feels. And if I can't build that trust by making them feel safe or at the very least listened to and understood, no matter how right or wrong my plan that's up in my head is, I'm going to have a difficult time getting them to follow and ultimately joining me in this leadership that we're marching across the finish line together.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for sharing that with us. And I really appreciate that you took the time in this busy time of during the pandemic. And thank you for watching the show. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of the CEO Thing. Bye-bye.